So, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time's 20th anniversary was on November 21st, and I had to make a video on it, even if it's late. The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time is one of the greatest games ever created, and one of the highest rated games of all time, if not the highest rated. I'm currently too lazy to check the facts on that, but I'm confident in my assumption. Ocarina of Time was a very influential game for 3D games and 3D action-adventure games. Games like Okami and Darksiders wouldn't exist as they are if it wasn't for this game. So, as I mentioned, Ocarina of Time came out on November 21st in 1998. That was 20 years ago, so I'm not too sure if I actually played it that year, but if I did, it was likely on that Christmas. So prior to Ocarina of Time, I never played a Zelda game. I watched my brother and somebody else play it at somebody's house. There was some drama involved there, so I won't talk about it too much, but shamefully I did try and steal that person's copy of the game until we're about to leave from their house and it dropped out of my pocket. I was caught on the spot and super embarrassed. I never attempted to steal a game again. I taught my lesson right there. So just don't look at me funny for telling you all that, because I was like 6 or 7 years old at the time. Yeah, so with Ocarina of Time, I had the Versus Book strategy guide that came with the big poster, and that's still hung up on my wall to this day. Initially, I think I watched my older brother play and beat Ocarina of Time, but since the game has multiple save files, I think I might have had a save file too. But anyway, I played this game as well and probably beat about 6 times in my life. But my first experience was awe-inspiring. The shift into 3D gaming wasn't that big of a deal to me because, like I said, I was like only 8 years old when this game came out, so I didn't have that long of a time with 2D games. I started off with the NES and only played Duck Hunt, Super Mario Brothers, and a little bit of my big cousin's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game. I think it was the first one. And then at about age 4 or 5, I got a Super Nintendo. So yeah, the leap into 3D wasn't anything I really thought about. So with Ocarina of Time, it was just so cool going on this grand adventure. Starting off in Kokiri Forest, beating the Deku Tree, going into Hyrule Field, and into the Castle Town for the first time. I think I still remember the first night outside of the castle of Hyrule Castle Town and defeating the Stall Children until sunrise. And then meeting Malin and waking her Mario lookalike dad. I also remember the struggle I had the first time around dodging the guards. Well, it wasn't that bad. I think I only got caught maybe twice in my first playthrough, but it was amazing sneaking in by climbing the vine, pushing the boxes, and sneaking through the water hole into the castle. This was Nintendo's first foray with 3D with Zelda, and you could tell they had some fun with it by how they played with the camera during cutscenes and Easter eggs they had hidden throughout, like in Zelda's courtyard. I think if you looked on the left window in the courtyard, you will see portraits of Mario, Peach, and Yoshi. And the right window just had a vase, but if you shot it with your slingshot, a guard will throw a bomb at you. The game was filled with so much little stuff I can go on forever about, but I want to touch on the gameplay for a moment. With the shift into 3D, Ocarina of Time played a lot differently from previous Zeldas. Not only did you have to deal with a 3D space, but the way you used and interacted with items was changed dramatically. Your sword was automatically mapped to B and your shield was R. And any items you received were mapped to a C button of your choice, excluding the up C button, which was for looking around in first person or listening to Navi. Jumping in this game was automatic as well, which at first I thought was a little weird, but I got over it quickly and it just made sense for the game. Ocarina of Time is not a platformer, so the minor amount of jumping you did have didn't need to be regulated with a jump button. If you wanted to jump higher or farther, you will simply run from a farther distance from the edge, and I think doing rolls will also grant you slightly longer jumps. And not to mention, this game had the A button as the primary interaction button that a lot of games followed after. If you need to talk to an NPC or read a sign, press A. If you want to pick up an item, examine an object, or ride an Epona, press A. It was just a simple design that prevented things from being too complicated. Let's not also forget about Ocarina's defining mechanic, the Z targeting system. The Z targeting system allowed you to always have your enemy in your sights. While it was good, I do feel like it made the game too easy, especially after playing 2D Zeldas after it, like Oracle Seasons and A Link to the Past. Even as a child, it was rare I ever got hit in the game. With Z targeting, your opponent is all within your frame and playing field, so what usually happens is you wait for the opponent to attack, use your shield or side jump, and dodge the attack, and afterwards attack with your sword. With Z targeting, there really is no reason you should get hit by anything that's blockable. The only time I found a fight still challenging was against Dark Link. Now, the first time you encountered Dark Link was phenomenal. You're in the water temple in this weird ass looking room that looks like it's in a void or something, and you have to cross all the way to the other side just to see that the door is locked. You think, what am I supposed to do now? So you turn around, start to walk back to the other side. As you approach the tree in the center of the room, you see a clear silhouette, and it turns out to be a shadow version of yourself. That shit was crazy for the first time, man. The fight against Dark Link is hard too, unless you have the Bigoron sword, in which case I think all you have to do is just spam the forward thrust to beat him. But if you use the Master Sword, all your attacks will clash with his, since he mirrors your inputs. But if you do a forward thrust, he will jump on top of your blade and attack you. Eventually the clashes will stop ending in a draw and hurt you. You have to think methodically to beat him with just the Master Sword and Hylian Shield. If you try using other items, I think he'll just dodge about everything. I know he evades arrows and the hook shot, but I can't remember if you time a bomb well if it will hit him. But yeah, the fight is a struggle without the Bigoron sword. Speaking of the Bigoron sword, I think that was my first experience with a side quest in a video game, I think, period. It was definitely my first experience with a side quest for getting an ultimate weapon. I did play Pokemon Blue and Super Mario RPG before this, but Pokemon really didn't have any side quests. Well, I guess you might count catching the legendary birds as a side quest, but with Super Mario RPG, I just watched my brother fight Kulix. I didn't do that myself. The quest for the Bigoron sword wasn't too daunting for me because, as I said, I did have a strategy guide, so I didn't really have to figure out anything. And I watched my brother do it first, but yeah, I did try teleporting for delivering the ingredients, which of course didn't work. The mask quest in Ocarina of Time was cool too, but it will go on to be heavily expanded upon in Majora's Mask. One of the best things about Ocarina of Time is its exploration dungeon design. Entering a new area in the game felt fresh and like you're actually on an adventure. Navigating Hyrule Field for the first time was incredible, and almost dying to that first giant P-hat was a moment I'll never forget. This was also one of the first games, I think, with a day and night cycle, if it wasn't the first, which added more to making the game feel alive. Each place in the game also had great atmosphere. Jabu Jabu's belly was weird and made it feel like you were inside a giant monster. Speaking of that dungeon, I wonder how people back then figured out how to that you had to feed Jabu a fish to get into the dungeon. I knew because I watched my brother play it first, and I think he might have gotten it from the strategy guide we had. But in the context of the game, it's not really clear. Yeah, you get a bottle from Ruto saying she's trapped in Jabu's belly, and I think an NPC mentions her duty is to feed him every day. But up to this point in the game, you never had to catch or use items with an empty bottle. I also found it insane though when you meet Ruto in the belly, she tells you that she's been swallowed by Jabu before, and even when she was younger. I'm like, this little girl who's probably like 11 years old has been getting swallowed by Jabu several times, and this happened to her even younger than 11 years old. The other dungeons were good, but it wasn't until the adult timeline where the dungeons became great. So the time skip is probably the single most memorable moment for people who play this game. The first time you pull out the Master Sword, the game just went on a whole other level. And when you stepped outside the Temple of Time right afterwards and see the ring of fire around Death Mountain, and then Hyrule Castle Town devastated and filled with those creepy as hell re-dead enemies, you just, I mean, I can't describe it. Speaking of those undead motherfuckers, going into graves in Kakariko Village as a kid scared me, primarily because of those re-deaths. Like, that was basically the reason. When I played it for myself the first time to get to, I think it was getting the free Hylian Shield and the Sun Song, I was creeped out because of how the screen would pause momentarily, and with that scream when the re-deaths would see you as they slowly walks toward you, and then if they're close enough, they'll jump onto you and start biting. And in a panic, I constantly mashed the B button. Well, I say this if it was only in the past, but those enemies still scare me to this day. Thankfully, using the Sun Song stuns them temporarily, making them less annoying and threatening. Ocarina of Time had plenty of other creepy moments too. The Forest Temple is creepy, but in a different kind of way. But the Wall Masters are almost as creepy as the Reed is. They're a lot easier to avoid. The Shadow Temple is creepy too, but I feel like its creepiness is more generic, and the bottom of the well is by far the creepiest dungeon, and you tackle that shit as a child. The dungeons not only had great atmosphere, but design. The first dungeon with the Great Deku Tree taught you the fundamentals of the game. It taught you how to look for weak spots in enemies, like the big Skulltulas. It introduced gated doors to the player, which require figuring out the conditions that need to be met in order to open the door. And I believe that first room was by defeating the Deku Scrub, which of course was just using your shield and making it bounce back at the Deku Scrub. It was also the first to introduce the torch and eye switch puzzles, which would be used in just about every dungeon afterwards. The puzzle started out simplistic as a child, but got more creative in the adult timeline. The one that always stood out to me was the Forest Temple room, where you had to use a torch and an arrow to hit the frozen switch on the wall. Yeah, so basically you just use your arrow, hit it through the torch at the center room to make the arrow go on fire and melt the ice that's on the eye switch. That was pretty clever to me as a child. It's kind of simple, but it was pretty clever. The dungeons in Ocarina of Time invite the player to explore every nook and cranny too, by having open passageways where you can't see the end, chests that are out of reach, and also hiding golden Skulltulas. Also, dungeons like the Dongo's Cavern, in which you have a central room with different paths to choose from, helps make the dungeons feel interconnected. Each dungeon also built upon previous items or mechanics you obtained in previous dungeons. Once you get the slingshot, it will be used in the cavern in Jabu, and the same goes for the bow and arrow. But each time you get a new one, it opens up previous block paths in said dungeon, and is always the key to defeating that dungeon's boss. I know people on the internet like to shit on the water temple, but I never found it that annoying. Sure, if you're not careful, you'll have to raise and lower the water levels too many times, but over the years I've always been able to minimize the amount of times I had to play Zelda's Lullaby. I still think the dungeon is very fun. The only dungeon in the game that feels close to being bad is the Shadow Temple. It's not really bad, it's just okay, which is the problem. You have all these memorable dungeons in the game, but the Shadow Temple is just sort of there. And a part of that I feel like is due to the way you get to it. Unlike every other dungeon in the game, the Shadow Temple really only requires you to play a teleport song to get inside. Like for Dodongo's Cavern, for example, you had to climb Death Mountain, enter Goron Village, talk to Darunia, get the bomb bracelet, and throw a bomb to open it. Or the Forest Temple brought you back to the Kakiri Forest after the time skip, which to quickly touch upon was a whoa shit moment. Because everybody else was still a kid and you're an adult, and you find out that Link actually isn't a Kakiri, and then you go into the part of the Lost Woods you never been in before. Well, excuse me, I'll quickly take that back. I think you do go there in the child timeline, but I think it's like optional. If I'm not mistaken, you don't have to go there and during your childhood. But yeah, so if you didn't, you have to go in this unknown area, navigate through that maze, and then enter the temple. Whereas in the Shadow Temple, you already been to Kakiri Village at least a couple of times, and you just have Sheik teach you a song and use dense fire to light the torches to get inside. In addition to the Shadow Temple, in addition, the Shadow Temple was just a dungeon. In addition, the Shadow Temple was the only dungeon where you didn't come in contact with the Sage. Saria called you to the Forest Temple, Darunia was in the Fire Temple, Ruto was in the Water Temple, and the Gerudo girl, I can't remember her name, was in the Spirit Temple. I think it starts with Anne. I want to say it's Nabu, but I might be wrong. Yeah, but she just told you Impa was in the Shadow Temple, but you actually never got to see her in it or before entering the temple, which actually is kind of disappointing. That's like one of the only returning characters, the only character from the child timeline you don't get to see as an adult. Well, until you save her spirit. The dungeon design of the temple was just sort of bland as well. It's the most linear of all the dungeons in the game. Even I will say even the Great Decatur might even been better than the Shadow Temple. Yeah, I believe that the critical path of the Shadow Temple is pretty straightforward. As I mentioned, like almost all the other, I think like all the other dungeons in the game, excluding Bottom of the Well, had like this big interconnected room, which with the Great Decatur was the part with the spider web. Dodongo's Cavern had that main room with the giant skull, Jabu. It's been a while, but I think it's like the it's the second room you go into for Jabu's belly. Forest Temple, of course, was that first room with all the torches. Well, I don't need to go into all of them, but they all had a big interconnected room, which made the dungeon feel a bit more alive. But the Shadow Temple was just pretty much a straight path, which made it feel kind of forgettable. And the boss itself was pretty, I don't know, it was pretty lame in my opinion out of all the bosses. I don't even think you don't even really need the Lens of Truth to beat them. All you really need is the hover boots and the arrow, because the eye part will automatically come into view once you shoot the hands. It just turned out to be a forgettable dungeon. Something to touch on quickly is this was my first time fishing in a video game, and I loved it. It was nice that in this bleak world of the future that you could just relax and fish. Now, in the Game Explainer video, they brought to my attention of the Hylian Loach. I never heard of that legend. Apparently, it's real. I've only managed to catch like the 2 big fishes required. I think the first one gives you the golden scale, and the second time when you're an adult gives you a heart piece. I never knew there were any fish bigger than those 2. Now I might have to try and catch it on my next playthrough, because now I'm intrigued. Any game with fishing in it, I will always compare to Ocarina of Time because of this. It was disappointing when I played Majora's Mask and there was no fishing spot. I think, if I heard correctly, they actually did add one for the 3DS remake, but I never played it because I don't have the 3DS. I haven't even spoken about the music or Pony yet. Ocarina of Time had some great music, man. It's probably my second favorite soundtrack of the series with, well, it is my second favorite soundtrack of the series, with Majora's Mask taking the #1 spot. But Ocarina of Time had Song of Storms, Kakariko Village, Gerudo Valley. Those are my favorites. I also love just playing made-up songs in my ocarina and talking to Saria, seeing what she has to say. Getting Epona for the first time was also amazing. I think that's also something anybody else who played this game won't forget. Go to Longline Ranch and find the caretaker now owns the place. And Malin and her dad have been kicked out of the ranch. So you challenge the new guy to a race with Epona, but you're locked in the ranch. For a little while, I was stuck on how to get out until I decided to try and jump the wall, and it was so amazing when I finally got. Excuse me. Let me try to start over a bit. I haven't even spoken about the music or Epona yet. Ocarina of Time has some great music. This is my second favorite soundtrack in the series, with Majora's Mask taking the #1 spot. Song of Storms, Kakariko Village, and Gerudo Valley are my favorites. I also just love playing random made-up songs with my ocarina. And talking to Saria too. Getting Epona for the first time was amazing. So you go back to Longline Ranch. I find that the caretaker now owns it, and Malin and her dad have been kicked out of the ranch. So you challenge him to a race and win Epona, but you're locked in the ranch. For a little while I was stuck on how to get out until I decided to try and jump the wall. It was so amazing when I got it to work. Man, and now it was just like I could travel this whole world in a new way. The final dungeon was a great way to end the game, and also discovering that Sheik was actually Zelda was quite shocking. As the game explained, guys, it said, looking back, they did waste Sheik. This whole time, Zelda was going around Hyrule as a ninja, and her only purpose was to teach you songs. I also had the Versus book strategy guide, as I told y'all, that came with 2 posters, and one of those had Link with the Master Sword and Sheik holding a dagger, fighting off a horde of monsters. It would have been so cool if you could have played as Sheik in certain parts of the game, or had her join you as like an AI partner in like in a fight or two. Sheik got her due though in Smash Brothers and Hyrule Warriors though, but looking back at it, it would have made the game even better if Sheik was in a bigger role. So the final battle with Ganondorf was cool. I remember the first time I watched my brother fight him, he used an empty bottle to hit him with an energy blast. Well, I think he might have did it first in the Phantom Ganon battle. I'm not too sure. This was 20 years ago, man. My memory is not too accurate as to my whole first experience with the game, but yeah, but damn, either way, that was neat. That you could use an empty bottle to fight him. And it was also really cool in that battle that his cape acted as his health bar. So the more damage you dealt to him, the more tattered his cape will become. Escape from the castle with Zelda was epic too. And for some reason, just about every time I played that part of the game, I never use love as soon as it starts. Well, I do know the reason. With all the rubble falling everywhere, it just makes running through it easier without having to worry about taking damage and dodging the debris. But I can't remember the first time I actually remember doing that. Yeah, it's as I mentioned, I played this a bunch of times, but once the castle came down and Pig Ganon rose from the ashes, that was a very intense moment. And then you just had your Master Sword knocked out of your hand. The first time around, I didn't have the big round sword, so I had, so I think I used the Megaton hammer and hit his tail. Some people found it hard to really try to figure out how to hurt him afterwards, but it was easy for me. I always knew you could just roll under his legs and then hit him. And as I mentioned, I did watch most of this. Most of my first experience playing the game was watching my brother, so I think I copied his tactics from there. I think I learned that from him. But yeah, beating him, getting your Master Sword back and beating him was one of the best moments in gaming, man. The ending of the game itself is one of the best. I'll probably put it up there with Final Fantasy 9, Final Fantasy 10, and Metal Gear Solid 3. And so after slaying Ganon with the Master Sword, Zelda sends you back to the past to live the life you're supposed to live. So yeah, and it really wraps up the whole game, the story, in a nice way. It does make you feel like you just had this whole grand adventure. And man, and also seeing Navi leave you right at the end, bro, man, that just they gave you all the feels right there, man. It was just a gut wrenching to see these characters this character that's been by your side the whole time just leave you. And then I think the very last scene was Link going back up to Zelda, back up to Child Zelda, and warning her of the events that were to come, because actually their actions sort of led Ganon to actually taking over Hyrule, since he lit the door open to the Triforce. Man, yeah, this game was just so amazing. I haven't really touched on any of the negatives yet. I think I'll go ahead and get to that. There aren't many. This game is almost perfect. I can say that on occasion the camera doesn't position itself properly, like if you're fighting an enemy by a pillar or something and the camera will have the pillar in view obstructing your view, but it doesn't happen that often. It's rare for me, so I'm not even really sure why I'm mentioning it. In my first couple of playthroughs, I was completely fine with how linear the game is, but when I played Ocarina of Time as many times as I have, I want to try and do things differently. And one of the biggest things I want to do is tackle the dungeons out of order. But you can't really do that, as you're gated by having certain items from dungeons in order to do so. I mean, you could beat Jabu Jabu's belly before Dodongo's Cavern if you run out of Dodongo's Cavern as soon as you acquire the bombs, go to the sword pathway and blow up the boulders, but you're already in the cavern, so you might as well beat it while you're there. The same applies for the adult dungeons, except for the Shadow Temple, I think. It's been a while since I played it, but I believe you can do the Spirit Temple as soon as you get the Lens of Truth, as getting to the Spirit Temple doesn't require the hover boost to get in. Nor do I recall them being necessary in the dungeon puzzles. But doing the Shadow Temple last is sort of underwhelming, given how I stated it's the most bland of them all. Something else that's sort of a nitpick is that I found the bosses too easy. They all consist of waiting for the boss to expose their weak point, which you use the new dungeon item to do. Hit them with your sword while they're stunned, and repeat this twice. But if you're good and spam jump and slashes, you can do it in just one try. I also tried the 3 heart challenge before, but due to how easy the regular enemies and bosses are, I didn't notice much of a difference. Honestly, most of the time that I got hurt in the game, it was due to me doing something stupid, like attacking a cuckoo, which was hilarious the first time I did it, and or holding a bomb too long, or dropping from a high distance because I was too impatient to climb down. Something else I tried doing before was only using rupees to acquire consumable items. In Ocarina of Time, you could pretty much get everything you need for free. Ammo and hearts can be attained by cutting grass, let alone getting them from treasure chests. And you can get bottled fairies for free at springs or in certain pots. And I think it may even appear in certain grasses too. And you can get free Lon Lon milk by playing Epona song in front of cows. The game makes it very easy for you to walk around for full wallet at all times. The only time you actually have to spend money is in the beginning when you need the Deku Shield. The game tries to make you think you need to buy the Highland Shield, and I did my first time, but you can get it for free if you rob one of the graves in Kakariko Village. When I tried my rupee only run, I didn't find that it changed my experience all that much. I almost never used Deku Nuts. You really could go the whole game with only using one Deku Stick, since you could just put it away by pressing A when you're standing still, or pulling out your sword by pressing B. As I mentioned, I almost never get hit in the game, so I don't really have to go out and buy milk or any red potions. And I rarely use magic too. I think I might only use maybe Den's Fire and then Naru's Love at the very end of the game. So yeah, and bombs I think was the only thing I had to run back and buy, but I don't even think that was even that often either. Especially since when you get the really big bomb back, I don't think you even need a shot for bombs for the rest of the game. I think I did spend money to get the fish for Jabu though, and that was a lot. But I did have to cheat for the ice cavern because I was about to run back and forth to buy that blue fire. Was it water you have to use for that? Like hot spring water. I think it was blue fire in that cave. But yeah, I wasn't about to run back and forth for that shit. If you played the game a bunch of times like me, I would suggest, I guess you should give it a try, man. It won't hurt. If you get bored with it, and then you get to start playing again like normal. Another thing I thought was weird was how getting the silver or gold gauntlets didn't make pushing the blocks easier. But it does increase your strength from picking up pillars and stuff. But I don't know. It's just a snow pick. I always think if your lifting power would be improved, your pushing would be too, but whatevs. Feels kind of weird to leave this video on a nitpicking note, but you all can tell that I really do love this game, and it's a classic for a reason. I'm looking forward to talking about my personal favorite, Majora's Mask, in 2 years when it has its 20th anniversary. But that's all for right now, and I'll see y'all guys later. Bye.